In this video, I'm going to show you how to make parts out of tubing. Now, if you have a straight piece of tubing, then that's pretty straightforward. You just have to make sure. Now, tubing, just by definition, is going to be hollow. Oops, let's set that to. And see. By definition, tubing is hollow. So it means you're going to have to do an outside diameter and an inside diameter. In this case, the outside is 1.5, the inside is 1. Let's finish that. Now, if it's straight, you can just do a standard extrusion like we've always done. One thing I would tell you to do is, when you're working with tubing, is use your mid plane when you extrude it. That way it'll be equally extruded around that midpoint, and it gives you an extra plane to work with when you have to go to constrain that. So let's just say that that's 10 inches long. Right, so there's a piece of tubing. Now if you want to put a notch in a piece of tubing, so when you're building things out of tubing, you want them to fit together. You're not just going to take a flat piece of tubing and butt it up against the round circumference of the or perimeter of a piece of tubing. You wouldn't have a very good joint, so we usually notch that. That's pretty easy to do. It requires us to use these planes, so let's turn these planes on here. I'm just right-clicking and turning those on. And let's create a new sketch on one of these planes. And I'll just use my circle tool, and I want it to be right there. And I want that dimension of that to match. So it's 1.5 OD tubing. Now, I don't have to put an inside dimension because I'm just using this to cut away material. Finish that sketch, and you can see there is my sketch on that plane. And now I'll just do an extrude cut. And what I want to do is cut through all in both directions. And that creates that notch. Again, if I wanted to butt that up against another piece of tubing, I'd have a perfect fit there, and then I could weld that. Typically, that's what you do when you're working with tubing. So there's a straight piece of tubing. What if I need a piece of tubing? Oops, I don't want to do a drawing. Well, let's go ahead. Oh, let's go do that because I was going to do that anyway. Let's put that on a drawing sheet. I'm running off the page here for some reason. Okay, I will need to save that piece of tubing. That's what's missing there. Let me make a new folder. Okay, let's go to our drawing sheet. And let's see now, you want to choose the front view. Like, that's okay, except the problem with that is my right side view, I'm not going to see that notch. That's really not the best front view. Let me go back to my, hang on a second here. Okay. You always want the long dimension on the horizontal. So this is actually the best choice for a front view, because in the right view, I'm looking at that notch. I'm going to add a top view too. And in fact, when you look at that, you might say, which one of these is get the most bang for the buck in terms of a front view, shows the most information? It's actually going to be that view. So let's try that again. Now, let's see, if I don't have that view, I can certainly create that view. Right? Go back. So you're not a slave to this thing. You can create your own view. So just orient it the way you want to see it for that front view. Back to your drawing sheet. And just click on, oops, let's see. on that little green arrow, that'll refresh this. One of those views, there it is. See where it says current? So that is the way that I set that view. So I can always create a custom view. All right, I don't know what's going on there. So drag that out there. Top view, right side, and my ISO. And also notice how the ISO, I'm showing the notch. It doesn't do me much good if I hide the notch. Now, let's assume I'm going to have more than one part on this sheet. Probably this is kind of just a simple part to be taken up a whole drawing sheet. So I want to add center lines to that. So let's just do this. Put center lines on everything. Not I shouldn't say everything. Not on your ISO view. And then we also want hidden lines. Right, you want to see that it's hollow tubing. Turn this off here so it's not hidden on there. Now notice sometimes you'll get these little hang-on lines here. If you can delete that, that's what I would recommend. And let's see, the other thing you're going to want to do, well, let's just try this because you'll see something. We try to dimension this thing. When you're going to dimension this, you can dimension it to that edge, or you can dimension it to a center mark. In this case, it doesn't really matter. If you have a kind of a funky notch or something, the center mark is really helpful because it's easy to dimension to that mark. Now let's fix the tolerances on this because I got 3 decimal places. I do not need 3 decimal places when I'm working with tubing. 2 is just fine. Okay, so we would need to call out the length. We want to call out this radius, call out the OD and ID. Now notice what happens when you do that. This one's great because it's calling it a diameter. This one, because of that notch in there, it's calling it as a radius. But it's a full circle, so that's not acceptable. So you want to override that and replace it with the diameter dimension. Don't leave it as a radius dimension. That's very confusing, right? So now OD is 1.5. I should have put another 0 or put a 0 in there. OD 1.5, ID 1 inch. So there's a good drawing of a piece of tubing. That's how you want to present it. Make sure you have the hidden lines and center lines, OD, ID, and also if you have a notch, you want to call that out like that. Okay, let's save that. And I can't remember if I started a new, did not. Okay, let's do a new part here. So now let's try a new drawing first. I mean a new model, then I'll do the drawing. Okay. If the tubing is bent, you can't extrude it. You're going to have to use the sweep tool. So first thing you want to do is draw the path. So I'll start here, dimension that, and let's just make that 8, make that 5. Now you're going to want to bend the tubing. You're not going to have a square corner like that. So go ahead and put the radius in there. Don't do that after the fact. So I want to radius this bend here. Now for tubing, you can't put it too tight because it'll just crush the tubing. You could do about as tight as you can do is like a 3-inch radius. Okay, so that's going to be the path for my tube. Let's finish that. And I'll need another sketch that shows me what's this cross section look like. Which the cross section I'm working on now is hollow round tubing, but it could be any shape. So I need to make a new sketch. Before I do that, I need a plane. So go to reference. If you click on the end, plane, click on the end point, and then the path there, you'll see it'll create a work plane there, exactly where we want it. So now let's make a new sketch on there. And again, it's going to be my cross section of my tube. And it's not solid. Now, it could be, certainly, but in this case, that's not what I'm doing. So don't forget, call out the ID and OD. Let's finish that sketch. And now I have 2 sketches, the path and I have the cross section. So now we'll go to features, and we're going to use swept boss base instead of extrude. Remember, you can't extrude on a curve like that. And there's two things you have to input. One is the cross section, which the software's smart enough to know because I just finished that sketch that that's going to be the cross section. And this one is going to be the path. See how it's blue? So just click on the path that you want to sweep, and that'll create your bent piece of tubing, right? We can turn that plane off. So I don't know what that pink ring is, but it'll go away here after a while. Let's look at our planes. Now, one thing, be smart about the way that you generate your sketch. So see how I have those planes there? I know exactly where they are. They're on the centers and on endpoints. So if I need to if I get to a point where I want to use those planes to mate this to another piece of tubing, I'll have that, because tubing is a little bit more challenging. You don't have a bunch of flat surfaces to mate to, so you want to have those planes available to you. Let's see, so if we wanted to notch that, we do exactly the same thing. Let's say we want to notch this end right here. We need a plane that way. So let's just take an offset. So I'm on features, reference plane. If you click on that one and look at the arrow, it's going to want to go up here. Now here's the distance. You remember that was 8 inches tall, so I just type in 8. Now I have a plane up there. I'm going to right click. Let's try that again. Try to turn off some of these. Right click, turn that off because I don't need it. Right click, turn that off. I'll want to leave these two on there. Okay, so let's make a sketch on that plane. And it's going to be circular. It'll be right there at that point. I only need the OD, remember, because I'm just cutting away, and that's 1.5 because it's 1.5 inch diameter tubing. Finish the sketch. And then just like we did before, we'll do an extrude cut. You want to cut through all in both directions. And now I have a notched piece of bent tubing. I could do the same thing down there if I need to. And let's put that on our drawing. Oops. Need to save that. You always have to save it, obviously. Let's see, where was that? Tubing parts. What number did I use before? Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's find our piece of tubing there. And we're looking for the front view. Most information, fewest hidden lines, longest dimension. And I don't really see what I want. You could use this. It's okay. A better way to do that, again, if you think about our paper is longer this way, the better way to do it is to put the longest length this way. So let's go over to where we created this. I'm going to move it around. If you come up here, click on that view orientation, and click on that. That's probably a better front view. So go back to our sheet, refresh that, and look at your current view. Now, it's pretty large on this page. So probably, again, I probably would put more than one piece on here. So I probably would end up scaling this down some so I can put more than one part on this one sheet of paper. Okay, now those bends or these tangent lines are going to show. You can leave them, it's not a problem. Again, we'll go and we'll put center lines on those views, and we will show our hidden lines. Turn off the hiddens on that view. got that little tail there. Delete that thing and dimension from there. Now we're going to have to think about what we want. We want to know how long this is here. Got 3 decimals again. Not really a big deal, except it's what that is implying is you're really concerned about this being super accurate. When you're working with tubing, you're not going to be working to 3 decimal places. And let's see, I'll need this dimension here, which you can call out. You try to call it out here. Now, the problem is you don't have a point sometimes to grab on there. If you can get it, that's fine. If not, you can always dimension it off of that view. I'll put a center mark on there. I need to call out that the radius of that cutout, which is going to be 0.75. I need the radius of this bend. That's very important. You call out the radius of the bend. And I'm going to need the diameter of my tubing. Now, typically what you're going to do with tubing is you're going to have a note that calls out the size of the tubing. So we can do that, or we can just put a note on there that says, let's say we want diameter 1.50. No, let's do it differently. Let's call OD by 1.00 ID. We'll say that's DOM. DOM is drawn over a mandrel. It's the best kind of tubing if you're going to bend. So you can put a note on there, or you can dimension it or whatever. Let's see. What else do I have? Now, if the bend isn't a 90, you should call that out. If you want to clarify that, it's fine. I think it could be understood it is 90. So that's how you create tubing and also put it on it, put the views on a drawing.